What's going on, everybody? I am not your host, Raymond Stiles. He is out this week. I am, however, joined by my good friend, co-podcaster, Jacob Klein. How are you doing?
Listen up, everybody. Dad is out. The kids have the house. We've got the house to ourselves, and it's going to probably go off the rails about halfway in, but you're going to want to be a part of it. And my God, what a week for
Yeah.
Ray to be absent. It's not going to stop us, tell you that.
You're absolutely right. We are going to get a little bit crazy because Ray is the guy who keeps us in line. Ray is the guy who keeps things moving. But you're going to want to stick around because this is a fun episode. We have a lot to talk about, a lot to get into. Football's back, Jake. How do you feel about that?
All right, so I'm going to hit you. I'm going to hit you with my little preamble here about the NFL season returning. I've got a real slew of mixed emotions here.
Yeah, for sure.
Football is just so different. It's in such a different tier that of being ingrained in the American culture than all the other sports. And that sounds a little dramatic, but honestly, football unifies people. It has larger congregations of the masses than any other sport. I'm talking at the stadium. I'm talking at people's homes to gather and to watch that form of entertainment that's only on once per week.
Yeah.
You look at the landscape of entertainment right now, and the new movies aren't being made. You've got programming and concerts and shows and music. It's not being put out there, and yet Americans' passion, football, the NFL, the Shield, will return tonight. And I just think, we should take a moment to recognize that obviously the viewing experience is going to be different, and we're going to talk about the specifics, especially the fluidity of the fan situation and how it seems to maybe vary, which is going to has a whole host of problems. But I really, Cream, just want you to take a moment and to envision football coming back. We should view sports as a type of reward. Football is on a normal timeline right now, ending in February, coming back in September, and yet we are so far from normal. How do you feel about the return of football and in this feeling at this time of the year in the fall when you're used to football coming back and it's the sense of comfort and warmth and familiarity? How are you digesting all of that in this climate?
It's tough. It's conflicting. I have conflicting feelings about it, like you, because you're right. It should be a reward for a functioning society, and functioning is not a word a lot of people would use to describe our society right now. But who am I to say we can't have football? Who am I to say that it coming back is not going to be an uplifting force for a lot of people who are dealing with a lot of things right now. As much as I have been skeptical of the NFL's plan and the plan of Roger Goodell and these owners of getting football back on pretty much a normal schedule, which is bizarre to think about, the fact that they're going to be able to, they're starting the season at the exact same time when the rest of the sports world was just completely blindsided by this and forced to, work on the fly to get things done. NFL is, I know they didn't have a preseason, but other than that, they're completely on schedule right now, which is crazy. I'm skeptical of that, but in the same breath, I'm excited. I can't say I'm not excited, like football returns tonight. We got Chiefs, Texans, Pat Mahomes. It's one of the most exciting players in sports. Like, I can't lie and say I'm not going to be tuned in. I'm not interested in that. So, it's conflicting. And on Sunday, when I get into my routine around 1 o'clock, I flip on the Birds game. Like, it's going to make me feel something. It's going to make me feel comforted and happy in a way that I wasn't getting before. So it's really tough to reconcile those two things. I just hope that everything can go smoothly. I hope that they've taken the necessary measures. I hope that the players and the staff and everybody involved has done the work to make sure that this can go off without a hitch, because it would just be a tragedy for this to go poorly and for all these people to be affected. So I'm feeling hopeful that they can get this done. We've seen success in the other sports. I hope that they've learned from those success And then of course learn from the mistakes as well to be able to make this thing happen. So that's that's the long and short of it, basically.
Yeah, well articulated. And let me just be clear. I don't want us to feel bad about football being back or have that
Right.
taint the experience or say, go into it with this mind that it's already, not
Right.
what it should be. It's not the original product. It's not the real game. I'm not a proponent of that. I just think it's really worth the consideration, and primarily with what you said in regards to like a setback with football, the lack of a protocol being in place like we saw with the MLB when an outbreak happens with the team,
Mm-hmm.
the cascading effects, the ripple effects that something like that has. And for the public, if we're in football mode in 2 weeks and something like that happens, and for it to be ripped away from you, as opposed to at least if it never happened, you don't experience it, only for it to be taken away from you, and now there's a cloud of uncertainty surrounding it. So I just wanted to put it out there. I think it's been maybe a little under-discussed. It seems like the whole NFL offseason, we've just flown right under the radar.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
here we are, an occasional update about a helmet, about 22% fan capacity, and we're just chugging right along.
Right.
Very, very casual. So it's worth noting, considering, and taking into account everything mentioned in this conversation, in this opening.
Yeah, you're right. That being said, you can watch the game tonight?
Football's back!
Exactly. So, Chiefs Texans, not the only game. Sunday afternoon, baby. The Birds are back. How are you feeling about that?
Man, I'll tell you what. The past 10 days, I've been hitting the Bleacher Report, the Eagles feed, pretty hard. Looking at the roster cuts, looking at maybe who's a limited participant in practice. I'm getting my feet wet. I'm looking at the beat reporters. I'm looking at the film that they have. I'll tell you what. Regardless, my expectations are high solely for the reason that in this type of environment, in this setting, to have a team that has a coach that is solidified in his place there, a franchise quarterback in place, a defense that answers to an authority in Jim Shorts, where it's clear what the expectations are and what your roles are and what you are willing to give up in order to bend and not break. And I think to have the infrastructure in place on a coaching level makes me confident and really keeps my expectations at 10 wins. NFC East should be favored. We have the pieces there. We have systems in place. We have trust and rapport between our most important players. I'm really excited for Carson. Obviously, the way last season ended, every Eagles fan just, really took it on the chin for about 2 weeks there, and all the coverage about, the stories and the rumors. And, of course, the Hurts pick. I mean, lest we forget. But I think it's time for Carson Wentz, in a fanless environment, to kind of remind the world and quell that inexcusable and just illogical hate that he's gotten. And now he's got some speed. He's got some playmakers.
Yeah.
He's got health. So
yeah, let's hope so.
Let's see what happens.
Yeah, let's hope. Obviously, some of the additions aren't going to be out there. Jalen Reagor not going to be able to play week 1. We're seeing some pretty hopeful reports that he's going to be out there week 2 after I think a lot of people were questioning his availability. So that's obviously a sign. We hear all the stories from camp that John Hightower was just lighting up the place, blazing down the field. Carson was able to get it to him. That's good. The only issue seems to be that offensive line, that patchwork job in front of Carson Wentz that has a lot of people worried. All right, do you share their concerns?
Listen, Jason Peters got more money. He's back in his bodyguard spot. He's our guy. He's gonna play till he's 45.
Yeah.
Okay? he's the dude, and he's gonna give us, I'd say, like most of the games this year. Like maybe he misses 1 or 2 because he's dinged up. He's obviously gonna come out of a lot of games, as we saw last year. But I'll tell you what, man. Lane Johnson is the one I'm most nervous about. I know he's due to come back, but he holds it all together, man. If you have him and Kelsey and Peters, you're always going to have a chance.
Right.
I mean, depends. We're going to see Pryor. I mean, kind of like we did initially with Big V, where like when he had to step up and there was all this, it's hard to evaluate him because, there's good players around him, and yet it's not the same type of position that you're evaluating. But Matt Pryor is going to be this year's Big V, where if he can step up, it's gonna truly bring things all together for the team. And if he struggles, it's going to be hard for this team to get going. It's going to be hard for them to maintain drives and to get the chunk plays that they need and to extend the play for Carson Wentz. You have those three guys, though, Jason Peters, Jason Kelce, and Lane Johnson. You always got a chance.
I tend to agree. The wide receiver spot, obviously minus Rieger, is going to look a lot like it did last year, save for John Hightower. Do you think Deshaun Jackson is healthy? Is he going to be able to stay healthy, stay on the field, and provide that deep threat? Which, I mean, turn the clock back to last year, he absolutely lit up this game. So, are you feeling hopeful that he can do it again?
Let me make this explicitly clear.
Yeah.
Despite not drafting Deshaun Jackson in later rounds in my fantasy league draft this year, he is going to light it up this year.
Yeah.
He's going to have a huge year. He's going to be healthy. He's going to open things up. And we saw what it did in one game last year. I mean, if you could legitimately have extrapolated, obviously he's not going to produce that way every game. But the threat of that, and if he comes out hot again this year, what that does for the defensive coordinator and how they have to game plan, if you can just have one speedy guy. I get that he's older. I get that he's probably lost a step. Tell you what, man, I got a lot of stock in Deshaun Jackson. Give me all of it.
Yeah, I feel similarly. I think he's definitely going to be the guy that they go to early. Obviously, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside and Alshon Jeffrey not going to be there either. Alshon Jeffrey hurt still, recovering from that foot injury. Still on the team, which is curious. Didn't really expect that, but hopefully he can come back and provide some an option for Carson.
Whatever.
Whatever. Exactly. But I do like your overall points. I do like the hierarchy of the Eagles staff. I like the familiarity with the system. They're the only team in the division with the same coach. They're the only team with the same offensive and defensive coordinators. They're going to have a leg up on the other teams in terms of not having had a preseason, right? And then if you can get your marquee players in the position to perform, then I think you got a chance. And Carson Wentz has to be licking his chops to get back out there after that playoff game. You're absolutely right. So I'm cautiously optimistic for this Eagles season, like you. I think it has some potential for problems and miscues down the road, but for the start, let's keep our eyes on the prize. Let's go 1-2 weeks at a time before before this whole thing collapses in on itself. I feel good about it. Do you want to move on to defense? How do you feel about the other side of the ball?
Yeah, D-line, I feel like this year, we've seen in previous years, like, they do create pressure, but, like, they never get the counting stats. They're never really that high of a sack team. Fletch is always at, like, he's been at, like, 8 or 9. He hasn't broken double-digit sacks in a couple years. The defense, I think, this year, because you legitimately, if Darius Slay is healthy and he is a shutdown corner, and you have a side of the field that Jim Schwartz says, oh, I've got my shutdown corner, I think that could open up different blitz looks, like secondary pressure that you never would normally see because, you need those guys because your linebacking core is so weak. I just feel like you added speed on both sides of the ball. The real question is going to be, is that what needed addressing above all else and with quantity? Because if so, I think you're going to see big jumps on the defense, guys swarm, better tacklers, hopefully. But I just don't know. It really comes down to Slay, man. If he's the real deal and he's shutting down, he's an island, and he's shutting down half the field for you, what Jim Schwartz can do with those remaining pieces. And really, it's just going to come down to the linebacker play again. I mean, those guys, if they're just going to be caught in no man's land consistently, and if Slay is good but not a shutdown, and if the pressure still just isn't getting home, it could be a frustrating year. I don't foresee that. But again, my vision's cloudy. After the Sixers off season, I have no idea to evaluate what they did. They got speed all over the place. I don't know if on defense it's going to lead to anything different than what we've gotten accustomed to, which is some back-breaking plays, and some late game comebacks, but ultimately a stop when you need it and a win when you have to have it.
And the secondary being one of the big position groups that had a lot of changes off season. Obviously, saying goodbye to Malcolm Jenkins was hard, and then a lot of the depth outside of those three starters in the secondary, the cornerback. It gets really thin really quickly. You hope Jalen Mills can stay healthy. You hope Darius Slay can do that, uh, and you hope the safeties can obviously fill in those big gaps that Malcolm is getting. Yeah.
Can I just jump in? I need your thoughts right off the bat. Quick hitters.
Yeah.
Rasul Douglas and Sidney Jones. Didn't you want to keep one of? Didn't you want to keep one of them?
I would have liked. I don't see a ton of reason why they got rid of both of them. I thought. I don't know.
Why?
They clearly haven't lived up to their draft potential. They clearly haven't done that, but surely, one of them is serviceable. You have a lot of inexperience now at that cornerback position outside of your top three guys. And, Jalen Mills isn't the most durable guy in the world. Like, he's had several major injuries in the last couple of seasons. Like, that was a very, very surprising move. Now I'm not there. I wasn't at. Obviously, the fans didn't really get a chance to see training camp this year without the beat writers there to report it. So we don't really know what happened. Clearly, they just figured it was time to move on, time to turn the page in the secondary. It's going to be weird. It's going to be, hopefully Cravon LeBlanc can step up. Obviously, they did the weird cut and bring him back real quick. I don't know what they were hoping to achieve there. It was weird. It was a weird week for the Eagles. They didn't really get anybody big in the waiver wire. I'm a little concerned about the defense. It feels thin to me. The secondary feels disjointed. Obviously, that can change. Will Parks, the guy they brought in, he's not going to be there for the start of the season at safety. We'll see what the rookies can do. I know they really like that dude out of Clemson, but we'll see if he can step in and fill a role day one. I'm not totally sure, but I don't know. It's football's with so many moving parts. It's tough to really get a hold on that kind of stuff. Do you want to get into predictions for Sunday?
Yeah, let me just give my 2 cents on that real quick.
Sure. Yeah.
Basically exactly what you said. If for no other reason than just an injury to the secondary and now a guy coming in that's inexperienced where an offense can directly pivot and say, this is who we exploit, this is who we attack. Where I'm not saying that Rasul Douglas or Sidney Jones are that much better, but to know the system,
right,
to be familiar, to have communicated with your teammates throughout however long, or at least some of them. I just think there's a lot of value in that, and I guess they saw value in, I think, a special teams guy or whoever it ended up being. But both of them being cut was an absolute surprise, and I agree. I think the defense is thin, but it's been thin in years past.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, a bad day for Howie Roseman, the cut day. Second and third round pick in 2017 going out the window. That's tough. You hate to see it. Do you want to get into predictions for Sunday? Must-win game?
Oh, get out of here.
I think it's a must-win game. I don't know about you. I think it might be a
God.
Must-win game. You only get 16 of these, Jake. I think it's
stick.
Against Washington? Come on now.
Didn't we give you 12 must-win games last year?
Yeah, I have 7. There were 7 must-win games this year, and this is one of them.
Okay, well, I'm glad to hear it's not double digits.
Yeah.
And we're going to hold you to that 7 number this year.
Well, things can always change. Things can always change.
There are no loans available at the Take Bank.
No.
So, no, it's not a must-win. And if anything, the new environment and all the unknown is all the more reason to propose that possibly this would be
a little chaotic.
A gotcha game, a dirty game with no momentum and no fun plays and ugliness
Yeah,
and penalties and
that's
just terrible commentating. I mean, we gotta really prepare ourselves here. And I'll tell you what, I think they're gonna win, but I could see it. I could see the first half of this game being UGLY.
I have a sneaking suspicion that you're right. A lot of factors. Obviously, no preseason, shortened training camps, shortened, basically no mini camps. The rookies having so little time with the team. A lot of obstacles against this, and of course for the refs as well. They need time to get into the flow of the game as well. So I think you're right. That defensive line in Washington is worrying to me. They got a lot of talent on that offensive line, on that defensive line, going against a disjointed unit for the Eagles, and a guy Carson Wentz who I think he might be running for his life out there in the first half. I hope that they can establish the run. I hope that they can get quick passes early, because you don't want Chase Young teeing up against you, man. Like, that dude is a problem, and that's an elite grouping. I know Washington isn't supposed to be very good, but that line is. I mean, they got a lot of talent, and I think you'd be dumb not to be concerned about it.
Yeah, I mean, the Washington footballs.
Yeah,
are,
the footballs. Yeah.
They are formidable on the D line. You have to hand it to them there, and you definitely have to recognize that you're going to want that ball out of the hands of Carson Wentz quick, at least in that first quarter, that first drive.
Yeah.
We
try to get some.
We saw
momentum. Yeah.
Yeah, just firsthand last year in the playoffs, like how much of a fluke thing, how little the margin for not having any punishment or residual effect to completely, not a factor now. And I just think the margin for error this year, he's got to come out. He's got to get the ball out of his hands quick. I think it's going to be, if Miles Sanders doesn't play, let's say, or he's really limited, I think Boston Scott is going to eat. I'm out here giving all the fantasy tips. I think you're going to see a lot of short passes, creative looks, going to the tight ends, your bread and butter. I think they're going to do enough to win. It's going to be a 16-13 game, one of those. A lot of field goals. So we'll see. I think they do enough to pull it out. But I'll tell you what, first drive, first half, it ain't going to be pretty.
Big Jake Elliott vibe.
Oh yeah, Bigfoot Jake.
Okay. I can dig that. Well, let's get out of the Eagles, because we're going to spend a lot of time this year talking about the Eagles, and Ray is obviously our big NFL guy, so it's a shame that he's not here with us. But let's get out. Let's talk about something you and I are a little more familiar with. Let's talk about the NBA. And obviously, the big stories this week: the Heat eliminating the Bucks in 5 games. Did you have that? I know. Did you say that they were going to do that? No, I didn't. I didn't either. I didn't have that. And obviously, Boston, Toronto going to 7 games. What a phenomenal game that was last night. What are your takes about the Eastern Conference playoffs?
All right, let me say this. This is legitimately such a tough bad beat for Sixers fans. Like, you've got all the teams that you had all this regular season interaction with and storylines with and history with, and here we are in the thick of the playoffs, and you've got your 2 main competitors in their Game 7. You have the Jimmy Butler Heat upsetting the Bucks. Now, whatever, that actually, Ray had kind of mentioned, on a previous pod, upending the Bucks and kind of having this kind of be thrown totally out of whack, and if one of the LA teams were to somehow miraculously lose, and now the whole picture of who's left is just so unfamiliar and chaotic and unpredictable, then maybe it kind of works to the favor of being oh yeah, the Sixers got swept in the first round, but who the fuck remembers that?
Yeah,
the fucking
now
Bucks
that
got swept.
Now that the Bucks have been miscast in 5 games in the second round, I think that takes a little bit of heat off of the Sixers for sure. But I mean, I still can't believe they did it. We're gonna see some. What's the panic level in Milwaukee? It's gotta be 10, right? It's gotta be pretty high.
like the Oklahoma City Thunder organization are just like already like prepared for when they call, and they're just like, we are not even answering unless it's like 2 firsts plus these two. Like they are going to be like, for Chris Paul, like you already know all the articles, Bucks must go all in to have chance of retaining Giannis. It's just man, no way that they're going to make the right move. You're not going to rely on them to make the right move. They didn't sign Malcolm Brogdon. They don't have a true
mistake,
They don't have a true number two. Middleton is good, but he's never going to be good enough to be the second best player.
They don't have a true like initiator. They don't have anybody to initiate at the end of the games, like
a key
the way that the other teams do.
A key observation, obviously it's similar with us, like that you can have a really good player, a Joel Embiid or Giannis. That doesn't necessarily mean they should have the ball in their hands in the last 2 minutes. You need a competent ball handler with that skill set. Even if this guy doesn't shoot that well, a tight handle, a legitimate guard, a guy who might and is willing to and does in NBA games shoot pull-up threes off a pick and roll to at least have that threat to his game. You need a guy like that, and they are available. Not all of them are superstars. Mm-hmm. They are available on teams that have that skill set. You need a ball handler in the guts of the game to be competent, to know how to draw contact and sell it, to know how to work a pick and roll to get the appropriate switch, to get the look that you drew up in the timeout instead of just going with whatever the fuck you could get because it's so disorganized. So that's a very animated way to put it, but you can see these playoff contenders, Sixers included, that need that ball handler in the guts of the game in crunch time that they can trust with the game on the line, even if it's not their quote-unquote best player.
And just to jump in, I think the Bucks are an interesting dichotomy to the Sixers when you look at how they chose to build around their star, or in the Sixers' case, stars. Now, the Sixers obviously, after that first initial foray into the playoffs, they went star hunting, right? That was the big quote. They took a lot of swings, right? they tried whatever they could to get a star onto the Sixers, and it's now ended in disaster. The Bucks took kind of the opposite approach, right? Homegrown players, they built from within, they had complementary pieces to try to get the best out of their two guys. And Middleton's not great, but he's a very good player in the NBA. There's not really any team that wouldn't that wouldn't have him if they could. I think he's a pretty good player.
He's pretty good. Sure,
he's not a star, but he's good. And Giannis obviously is a superstar. The Bucks chose to build around them in a way that I think is the exact opposite of the Sixers, and one that I think gives them the Sixers maybe a little bit of credit, because there's been a lot of talk after the exit and after the disaster of the season is that, oh, well, the Sixers should have just kept everybody. They shouldn't have tried to acquire a star. They should have just, kept Rocco, kept Dario, built from that talented group we saw in 2017, 2018 and tried to cultivate it. They shouldn't have just gone star crazy. Well, the Bucks are what happened when you try to do that. There is no easy solution. And it's just a point that's been kind of digging at me. Is that the Sixers they were just catastrophically bad. They made all the wrong decisions. And they did. They made a lot of very poor decisions. But their initiative, I think, was right. In order to succeed in the NBA, you have to take risks and you have to go all in on something. The Bucks chose not to do that. They chose to let Malcolm Brogdon walk. They chose not to go after a star-level free agent or star-level player that they, after last season, they absolutely could have gotten. And this is where they are with 1 year left on Giannis and a bunch of Miami rumors. So I just wanted to put that out there. And it's a little bit off topic, but I think that, fans who say that the Sixers front office totally had it wrong, I don't know. I think that the execution was bad. I think in theory their plan was sound. I mean, we all sat here. We have the records. We all agreed with a lot of what they did. I think a lot of the fans did. And now they are conveniently forgetting that is just what's bothering me. I know
Yeah.
it's a lot to lay on you, but feel free to parse through that, or you can move on.
I guess I'll just hit you with one last comment on it, which is everything you said can be true, and yet that Bucks team can still win 70 games and be considered one of the greatest objectively regular season teams that has role players at the appropriate positions.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of evaluating what it takes to get to the elite championship level, what does that show you? That you have a team that won 70 games and is like the number one seed, and yet that doesn't project to playoff success.
Yeah.
And evaluating the moves it takes and evaluating the talent and the trades and what's available for what it takes to get to the championship level in the playoffs is just such a different animal than putting a good product on paper,
Right.
you know, and saying this is a playoff team. They're
trying to fill out a team is not the same as trying to, just get the best chance at a championship.
Right.
It's a completely different animal, and I think some teams have recognized that. And then obviously the Bucks, clearly a huge misstep the last couple seasons. Yeah.
We're in the same, moving forward, basically the same boat.
Yeah.
Each organization has reached a crossroads, a pivot, an inflection point that says
Right.
you have to go all in, you have to get innovative, you have to show the most important people something, because if not, you're never going to be able to achieve what you originally set out to do.
Yeah, agreed. Over to the West, do you have any Lakers Clippers takes? I know you feel that that's this impending series is the reason that we've gotten an NBA bubble.
Yeah.
Are you excited about it? I mean, obviously, it's not a done deal yet. Both teams are up 3-1, right? Looking to close it out in the coming days. But I think you got to feel good if you're the Lakers and the Clippers. I think that matchup is imminent, to say the least.
Yeah, I think in, simple terms, this is the reason everyone's ass is to fucking Orlando. Like, regardless of who comes out of the East, even in this who knows what's going to happen playoff dome bubble fanless arena,
Yeah.
there is no chance that any basketball fan is looking at that Western Conference Finals and saying anything less than this is the motherfucking finals.
Yeah.
I mean, this shit, this star power, these personalities, this is what it's all about.
Yeah.
This is why we all came to Orlando, and I hope it lives up to the hype. If the Clippers just go in there, take care of business with a nice little gentleman's sweep, and just Bron is just like, could you imagine? I feel like Bron's whole demeanor about the entire, like, he would just be like, well, the whole bubble situation, we were kind of here for different reasons, and it's different for every team. And
I can't even imagine that. I'm still in shock that we're gonna get this series. And I misspoke. The Lakers they're up 2-1 over the Rockets, so it's not a done deal yet. Obviously, the Rockets have shown a lot of resilience this postseason, so we can't totally count them out. But I think it's fair to look ahead at the series that I think a lot of people have been expecting, and to be honest, I've been hoping for. I mean, for as chaotic and crazy as the East has been, the West has pretty much gone according to plan. Denver, Houston, I think a lot of people would argue that those, it's seeds 1 through 4, and with the Lakers and Clippers, having the advantage now, I know we don't know what's going to happen, but I how do you feel about that series kicking off in the bubble in contrast to a potential Heat, like Raptors conference finals, or Heat Celtics, which just feels very crazy, like the fact that the Heat have gotten that far. When you put it side by side with the Lakers Clippers, I mean, is anybody going to watch the East series? Is what I'm concerned about. What do you think? You're on mute, Jake. Sorry.
Oh, you had to point that one out to me live on the air, huh, Cream?
What did you want me to do? It's just the two of us.
I would think that the parity between the conferences, like, you're really saying that whoever comes out of that East matchup, it's just a foregone conclusion, kind of. And if anything, it's just another argument for the reseeding 1 through 16.
Yeah.
Let's get the best teams in the finals. Like,
if
you're gonna do this setup, and then you're gonna have however many millions tune in for games 5, 6, and 7 of the Western Conference Finals, only to see that dip exponentially when it's like Toronto representing the East, or I guess Miami. Either one of those might have a decent fan base, but I mean, it's just not the same thing. If it was even if it was the two LA teams in the finals and it's literally one city, the sheer basketball, like the talent that you would see, would be worth it.
It's tough to argue that those aren't the two best teams. From what we've seen this playoffs, I know the Clippers had a little bit of trouble in the first round with the plucky Dallas Mavericks, but
God, they were fun to watch.
It's
man,
tough to say that those aren't the two best teams.
Agreed.
They fit all the pieces of what we consider a championship contender, right? So it's going to be interesting to see how those series, their current series, and what, the build up, the fanaticalness of a conference finals with LeBron and Kawhi would look like. They have not met in the playoffs, right, since that Spurs Heat series where he kind of just sunned him would be, I think, an appropriate term.
Yeah,
I think that's gotta be what every NBA fan's looking forward to, right?
it's what they call in the business must-see TV.
Yes. Okay. Speaking of must-see TV, your Philadelphia Phillies, baby. They have rebounded well from a slow start. They are finally looking like a competent team. They're getting a lot of production up and down the lineup, and they got a very interesting series coming up. Tell me if you've heard this one before. The Phillies are now going to play they're going to head down to Miami. They're going to play the Marlins 7 times in the next 5 days. How do you do that as a baseball team? How do you play a team 7 times in 5 days, the same team over and over again, without clawing your eyes out? I don't know. What's your take on that?
Dude, it's the 7-game Miami Marathon that we've all been clamoring for. It's the fucking Catalina wine mixer, man.
Oh,
it's the
wow.
fucking real deal, dude. Fucking 7 games, 5 days, 7-inning games, the same team. I mean, what are we even doing? There's 20 games left in the season, man. 8 teams from each freaking league are going to make the playoffs, dude. Like, I don't know.
Certainly, I mean, it's been a ridiculous year in baseball. I mean, so many things have changed. Baseball has been, I think, the most affected by this. Obviously, cutting their season down into a third of it is just bonkers in and of itself. But the way that the MLB has had to maneuver these outbreaks and with the scheduling and now this is where really the Phillies have to kind of just bite the bullet, right? Like they just have to get through these games, man. I don't know, man. They have not had a ton of success against the Marlins recently. Recent memory serves that they first series of the year they lost 2-1, right? And
Correct.
The Marlins are not that far. I think they're just 2 games back. Like, a lot can change in a 7-game series. Now the Phillies are in pretty prime position to make the playoffs. What's your confidence level of them I think the goal should be just to get through the series intact, right? Like, just have all your players not crushed under the weight of how much baseball they're playing. But what's your expectation level for this next week? And then, of course, the rest of the season as they try to finish up this home stretch and potentially head back to the postseason for the first time in a while.
Yeah, I mean, I think generally, if none of the players or staff spontaneously discombust, that's ultimately a win.
Yeah.
I will say that a series like this does not suit a team with a mediocre, historically terrible bullpen. So let that just be duly noted that we could...
The worst bullpen in baseball, just so we're clear. Hands down.
Also in baseball's history.
Yeah.
One of the worst.
Yeah,
so
one of the worst, yeah.
Just slap that out there for the public to consume that they already knew. But, dude, I get what you're saying that you want everybody to just come out healthy, but, dude, you go 2-7 during this thing and just everything changes. And
Yeah.
the whole perception of the season and
Right.
clawing back after the initial struggles, everything changes so rapidly. And like what you mentioned about going back to the playoffs, like this Phillies team in the playoffs is that team that you don't want anything to do with, man. With that 1-2 punch and that pop, like telling you, we sneak into the playoffs.
Just to piggyback off that, the fact that they're like 3 games above 500 with, again, one of the worst bullpens in Major League Baseball history. How long have they been playing baseball, Jake? Over 100 goddamn years? Like, what the hell? Like, the fact that they're 3 games over 500 should tell you all you need to know that this lineup is absolutely stacked. It's the best Phillies lineup I've seen in a decade. Like, just top to bottom, like, Bryce Harper started off the year completely on fire. He slowed down, and they just haven't lost a step. Alec Baum comes in. This dude's a monster. This kid's great. Why didn't everybody tell me about this kid? Like, I know, like, oh, he's the third pick, but, like, they didn't tell me he was going to be this good. Why didn't anybody tell me this, man? Like, what the hell? Didi has
Dude's a
been
stud.
great. Yeah.
Yeah.
And just Didi, Segura, the entire Kutch has been better. Like, and then they got these guys, Phil Gosling. I don't know who that is. He's hitting though. He's hitting really well.
Local boy Phil Gosling.
Yeah, Andrew Knapp is suddenly a good baseball player. Who would have thunk? And you're right. They got those 2 pitchers, man. They don't have much else, but they got those 2 pitchers. You know, like
In a
you're
playoff
absolutely
series.
right. In a playoff series, like anything could happen. And if they have to win the game 10-8, which like has been their success this year, right? Like they've been winning these games 6-5, 9-8. Like they haven't had a 3-2 win all year. Like that doesn't compute for them. No, like they're either winning 7-10 or they're losing 11-8. Like it's just a bonkers series. And if you told me before the season that the Phillies would be interesting, I would have been like, oh, cool. Yes, I would take that. I don't think anybody saw that they would be this interesting, right? Like this has got to be one of the most interesting teams in baseball. Just the discrepancy between the hitting and the offense, and now that their defense is bad now, man, I don't know what to do with them. But I'm just I actually am excited to watch their games because I know something's going to happen. I know runs are going to be scored. I know that shit is going to be crazy.
And just to kind of, let me just end our conversation here by let me throw you something here.
Yeah,
This Phillies team, man, Phillies team is an 80s action movie, man.
Yeah, that's a good
This
one.
Phillies team is coming in high octane,
Ooh.
good explosions, no CGI, power up and down the lineup, like good enough pitching at the top of the rotation to steal you the first 2 games before you lose the next 3, and then you win the next 2, and then that's 4 games, and that's how we're going to do it. And obviously, 80s action films, they've got their glaring errors, terrible dialogue, and just horrendous chemistry with female characters.
Yeah.
And this Phillies team, the bullpen basically being socially isolated from the rest of the team because that bad energy, the other guys can just feel it. They're like, man, I'm hitting like 320. Like, I don't want to even get near those bullpens. It's like, or maybe they do because they're like, man, I would tee off on these guys if I was on the other team, man. I'd fuck your shit up if I was on the other team, dude. Just so you know. And he's like, dude, we're teammates. But I'll tell you what, this Phillies team, hell of a lot of fun to watch. Even when they're frustrating and they've given up a 5-run lead, they're still fun. Like,
right.
Other years, it was just pure anger. Where this year, it's like, shit. It's like, we'll come back. We'll hit a bomb.
In years past, when they would have a bullpen meltdown, you would go, well, that's it. That's the game. It's over.
Turn it off.
Bullpen guy gave up 3 runs. Game's over. Now it's like when the bullpen gives up 3 runs, we're like, ooh, are they gonna be able to come back from this again? And it's like the bullpen, and then they do, and then the bullpen gives up another lead. And you're like, oh, can they come back from it again? And sometimes they do, and
dude,
that's just like crazy.
Entertainment at its finest, dude. They're making baseball cool.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, I mean, it had to happen eventually. Baseball being cool. They just, unfortunately, now is the time of the podcast that we both been dreading to eulogize the Flyer season, which ended tragically this past week in a bitterly fought series with the Islanders. A season with so much hope, so much potential, tragically struck down at the end. How are you feeling about the end of the Flyers as we know it, as the hot team in Philadelphia sports? How do you feel? Does it hurt?
God, it was just so nice to have the content and the team and the feel-good nature of their success, and they really turned it on in the bubble, and they were fun to watch, and they had depth, and they had a really good goalie, and now they're gone. And I guess where my head is at is just you have Game 7, and you say you're just so grateful to be there. You're proud of the guys for battling back.
Right.
Oscar Lindbaum gets to taste just a morsel of playoff success and what that does for the bond of you with those other guys that you go to war with. I mean, that matters, and making it to the Game 7 matters. But to lose in that fashion, it really should be. I honestly may look into this as a psychological study of the Philadelphia fan base. Of do you want the Game 7 handed to you like this? Or do you want the Raptors Game 7 and have your heart break into a million pieces, but you can go back in with all the feels, and that whole game has a certain magic to it, even if it's just this crippling, terrible, dark magic.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about that. If you have any thoughts on wanting to just get smacked in the mouth and a little embarrassed on the last go around, or to just end in heartbreak. But either way, Philly fans, we've gotten used to it. There's going to be more to come, and it's who we are. It's in our DNA.
Yeah, it's tough. As obviously as you're watching Game 7, obviously did not go the Flyers' way. Started off bad, continued to be bad, and then ended bad. What was the final score? 4-0, 5-0, something like that.
4-0, I think.
Yeah.
Couldn't score, man. They just couldn't score.
Yeah, couldn't get anything going. They looked tired. They looked worn out. They looked, discombobulated. I just think that the series took a toll on them that was insurmountable. Like, they just couldn't get over that hump. Game 6 was so dominated by the Islanders. The fact that they were able to squeak out a double OT win.
Yeah, that was something
a real
else.
credit to them, but I feel like the price that they paid to get that was just too much, that their bodies couldn't handle it. To have to defend for that long, and then just turn around and do it after only a day's rest again. The Islanders looked sharper. They looked faster, to be honest, and the Flyers looked outmatched, which is tough. To your question, I don't know, because as I'm watching that game, and I watched most of it, there's a sense of detachment that you can take, that you're able to it just wasn't in the cards, as opposed to the momentary heart rip of a Toronto Game 7. I can't tell you which is better, which is worse. They're both bad. I know it leaves the Flyers with a lot of question marks this offseason, because this was as much as it was a step in the right direction for the Flyers organization. This is not a super young team, it is not a team with a ton of cap flexibility, a ton of flexibility in the locker room. They have a lot of guys who are getting up there in age. Claude Giroux, just one of them. James Van Riemsdyk was very absent this series. His presence was lacking for sure. Kevin Hayes was great, but it is disappointing, because I don't know. There's not a lot that the Flyers can do to improve their team this offseason, and that's what is really tough. If they had gone down fighting, I could have rationalized keeping the band together, right? And having one more run. But the fact that they just looked totally outclassed in Game 7 to the Islanders, it's got to be a step back for the Flyers after all the success that they had this season. And I'm not trying to take any of it away, but it's just it leaves you with a bad taste in your mouth. And I wonder what the Flyers organization, Coach Vigneault, I wonder what they're thinking in terms of where this team goes next season, because there are no easy answers. So that's what's most disappointing to me about the fact that it was just a blowout in Game 7. In the second round, like that's tough. We'll see what the Islanders do for the rest of the series. I think I'm going to root against them, I think it's safe to say. But
without question.
Yeah, I don't know. What did you think? Did you think it deserves a I thought the Flyers season deserved better than to end like that is what I'll end it on.
Yeah, I mean, all that to say, like, man, we can have expectations for these teams, and we can hope, and we can plot and project all we want, but when you don't get out of the second round of the playoffs, you're just not of that upper echelon. And, like, Sixers, Flyers, like, we got to just really acknowledge that and stop trying to trick ourselves, and I'm the main culprit of just, like, it should work, and there's enough there. I mean, this Flyers team, I think the toughest part is having so much positive press and vibes and outlook, only for it to end with a very murky, uncertain, clouded future.
Yeah.
Even though it seems on paper like, wow, coach came in, seems to have done a great job. Depth seems to be something they really hung their hat on. The goalie is legit, and yet all that's true, and yet we still have this really murky cloud of who needs to get moved, and do you need a legit superstar, and do you trade on Drew while he's hot, while he still has high value? You know, there's a lot to look into, and it's just a shame.
Just to rip that band off, they're not going to trade Claude Giroux. But you're right about everything else. It should have been a stepping stone for greater success. And we are just left with questions about what they can do to move forward, and that's a real shame because it was a very fun Flyer season. You know, one of the best in recent memory, right? And that's a shame that it ended that way. But at least we have Carter Hart, you know.
Nice.
All right, I think that's gonna do it for us. Jake, do you have anything left to add?
No, I guess I just want to say. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Yeah, go Birds. We will talk to you next week. Hopefully, Ray is back.